All right, some really big news is coming down the pipeline. We're talking about a massive tax reform. They're calling it GST 2.0, and you can mark your calendars for September 22nd, 2025. Now, this isn't just some small adjustment. It's a complete reset that's going to change the price of pretty much everything, from your shampoo to your next car.
So think about this for a second. What if your everyday expenses, your groceries, your toiletries, even that new car you've been eyeing, were all about to cost less? We're not talking about some abstract economic theory here. This reform is designed to put real money back into your pocket.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll cover what this big reset actually is. Then the fun part, how your shopping cart is about to get lighter. We'll also hit the road and see what it means for cars. After that, we'll look at the winners and losers, get into the big strategy behind it all, and finally, peek at what might be coming next.
All right, let's dive right in. Section 1, the big reset. At its heart, the whole idea is pretty simple. It's about taking a really complicated system and making it, well, a whole lot simpler.
And just to show you how big a shift this is, look at the old system. We had this kind of messy 4-slab structure, 5, 12, 18, and 28%. And on top of that, there was often this extra cess tax thrown in. Confusing, right? Well, now we're slashing that down to a much cleaner 2-rate system, a standard rate of either 5% or 18%. And yeah, there's that higher 40% rate, but that's really just for luxury items. The whole point is to make things way more predictable for everyone.
And you gotta understand, this is way more than just shuffling numbers around. This is what's being called a growth reform. The real goal here is much bigger than just changing tax rates. It's a huge strategic play to get people spending, make life easier for businesses, and, light a fire under the whole economy for the long haul.
Okay, so that's the big picture. Now let's bring it right down to your kitchen table. Section 2 is all about your shopping cart. And this is where you'll really start to feel the changes in your own budget.
And the savings on the stuff you buy every week could be pretty huge. I mean, think about your daily essentials. Toothpaste, soap, shampoo. Those were being taxed at 12, sometimes even 18%. Now, bam, down to 5%. It's the same story for packaged foods like biscuits and noodles or dairy like butter and cheese. These are major drops that could genuinely make your monthly grocery bill look a lot friendlier.
But wait, it gets even better. This right here, this is probably the single most dramatic change of the whole reform. For absolute staples, we're talking milk, paneer, and basic Indian breads, the GST is going from 5% all the way down to 0. Yep, 0% tax. That is a game changer for making daily food more affordable.
Now, let's literally shift gears. We've covered the shopping cart, so let's head over to the car showroom. Section 3 is all about how GST 2.0 is going to shake up the auto world. If you're in the market for a small car, this is fantastic news. Before, these cars were taxed under a complicated setup that was somewhere between 28 and 31%. Now, it's a clean, flat 18%. That is a major price drop, and it's exactly the kind of boost this part of the market has been waiting for.
Now you're probably looking at that 40% rate and thinking, whoa, that sounds high. But here's the crucial detail. It's actually a price cut. See, before, larger vehicles got hit with 28% GST plus a hefty cess, which pushed their total tax burden way up to between 43 and 50%. So this new all-inclusive 40% rate is actually simpler and cheaper.
However, it is not all good news on the road. For fans of big bikes, and we're talking about engines over 350cc, it's a very different story. They're actually getting a tax hike. They're moving from a total tax of about 31% up into that 40% demerit slab, so yeah, those bigger motorcycles are one of the few things that are actually going to get more expensive.
So, with all these changes flying around, it's pretty clear there are going to be some big winners and, well, some losers. Let's do a quick breakdown, sector by sector.
And man, the winner's circle is pretty crowded. We already know about everyday goods in most cars, but check this out. Consumer durables, like ACs and TVs, are dropping from a huge 28% all the way down to 18%. The insurance sector gets an incredible deal. Retail health and life insurance are now completely GST-free. And even a core industry like cement gets a big tax cut down to 18%, which is a massive help for construction.
Of course, it can't be good news for everybody. Some sectors are seeing a mixed bag, or even a negative impact. Home care, stuff like detergents, no change. They're staying at 18%. Coal is actually seeing its tax jump from 5% up to 18%. If you're into high-end fashion, clothes over 2,500 rupees are also going up, from 12 to 18%.
And like we said, sin goods and those big bikes are getting bumped into that top 40% slab. So all of this begs a really big question. Why? Why make all these changes, and why do it right now? That brings us to Section 5, unpacking the huge strategy behind this whole shakeup.
So what's the 30,000-foot view here? Well, analysts believe there's a really clear intent from the government. They're doubling down on the Indian consumer. The big idea is to boost our own domestic spending, to act as a cushion, protecting our economy from all the uncertainty happening out in the world. This is a major bet on strengthening the economy from the inside out.
But a bet that big doesn't come cheap. The estimated cost, meaning the amount of tax revenue the government is giving up to make this happen, is around 480 billion rupees every single year. That's a massive investment in us, the consumers.
And that's where you find the big strategic trade-off. For a long time, the focus was on building things, roads, ports, that kind of stuff. This move shifts the focus to putting money back into our pockets so we can spend it. The hope is this will create a stronger, more resilient economy. But the risk, it could mean less government cash available for those big infrastructure projects down the line.
All right, so for our final section, let's look to the future. Because from the sound of it, GST 2.0 isn't the end of the story. In fact, it might just be the beginning of something even bigger.
Some analysts are even talking about a cavalry of reforms coming right after this one. They're talking about finally tackling some huge, long overdue issues. Things like deep reforms in land and labor laws. This suggests that GST 2.0 isn't just a one-off move. It could be the first domino to fall in a whole series of major economic changes.
So let's leave it with this final thought. GST 2.0 is, without a doubt, a landmark reform designed to supercharge the economy from the consumer up. But if it really is just the first step, if that cavalry of reforms is truly on its way, then the real question becomes much bigger. How will this entire agenda reshape India's ambition and its trajectory on the world stage? Now that is the real story to watch.